Hello. So hello everyone and welcome to the 5th day of our programming on the CDR Pavilion, the first ever carbon removals pavilion at a COP. Still very exciting after 4.5 days to be here and to be able to bring this to you. My name is Chris Sherwood. I'm the Secretary General of the Negative Emissions Platform, which is one of the organisers behind the pavilion. Very pleased to have you here, and I'm going to hand over to Christian Evers-Denot from the City CDR Initiative. But before I do that, and before I hand you over to his fantastic panel, I also would like to raise your awareness of the fact that we have an exciting cocktail event tomorrow evening in the city, in the Botanical Gardens, in a glass building in the Botanical Gardens near the riverbanks, which you can register for. You should be able to find a link to that on our website, which is cdr30.org. And we have the QR code to the website on the reception desk there in case you'd like to be there. It starts at 6 p.m. and it will be very, very cool. Hope to see you there, but in the meantime, leave you with your expert panel.
Thank you so much, Chris. Really great to be here and host this event together with you and High Level Climate Champions, Chris Nidal, the carbon removal lead in the back. Shout out to Chris. We're going to try to make this as fun and interactive as possible because it's a great informal setting here. We're amongst friends, a few friends, but we're amongst friends nevertheless. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that we're here at COP, which in many ways I've noticed is always a bit of a great equalizer. You might have CEOs on the stage and still only 3 people in the audience, or some random individual and 30 people in the audience. So it can go both ways. I hope we'll have some people trickle in. I think it testifies to the fact that what we are doing and talking about here is cutting edge stuff. So much so that for some it might be sort of too far out to chime in. But we are here, we are having this conversation, and I think that is an important stepping stone to all the good stuff that's come on this topic. The topic of municipal power and how to realize carbon sink cities. Now I have a stellar panel of speakers, back speakers here, including Mina from SOM, Joan from Arup. We have not Leah, but Bernard, a colleague from UN Habitat. We have David from XPRIZE, great lecturer here, Ina from the City of Helsinki, and Asif, who I'm sure will be joining in a moment from the Global Continental Mayors. So a stellar sort of bank of speakers. I will kick off with a bit of a side chat together with Joan and Mina here about that's my presentation about the topic of carbon sink cities, about what SOM and Arup, leading urban design, architectural, engineering firms in this world, what they are already doing on this topic. First we have here Mina, thanks again for joining. I want to ask you briefly if you could sort of elaborate a little bit on the journey to where we are now, because 2026 it was Mina that introduced the urban sequoia design concept, which is effectively about how to realize buildings that are net negative and give back to their environment. And now we are here 4 years later, COP30. We've co-developed with a few other partners a vision of carbon sink city, so scaling up, right? So tell me, Mina, first and foremost, why? What motivated you personally, and I think SOM to dive into this, which at the end of the day is not immediately like some commercial banker or something for the company, right? So can you elaborate?
Thank you so much, Christian, first of all, for inviting me to be part of this exciting panel. I think it's really important to set the vision for what the future is going to look like based on realistic visions, not necessarily just ideas that tell great stories, but also ideas that can be realized and that can be delivered on the ground. And urban sequoia, even though it may look like, it sounds like it's a blue sky thinking, it's perhaps a realistic vision, it can be really realized tomorrow. And that's the sort of inspiration that we have had from day one. It's about bringing solutions that already exist out there and intelligently and creatively combining them to envision buildings acting like trees, absorbing carbon. And by that I mean, I think first and foremost to help answer your question, the reason why we thought it was necessary to go beyond net zero is because the future demands the pace of building stock growth is so fast that it really demands a much bolder and much sort of greater thinking that we need to leapfrog beyond net zero as fast as possible. And I think it's companies such as SOF, Arab and others that have the capacity, that have the capabilities to be able to explore and venture into those areas that may seem out of the norm. It's I think our responsibility to take the lead on. And that's the reason why we started our Municipal project, where we envision buildings can act like trees and the cities can become like forests. And the vision behind it is not again relying on necessarily new technologies or emerging technologies only, but leveraging systems and structures that already exist out there and combining them into this new model of construction. For example, instead of thinking of buildings as layers, where typically you would build a building, first you do the structures and then you would add the building systems, then you would add the interiors, then you would add the envelope. We actually thought about what if every component of a building could actually have more than one purpose. So the structure becomes not only the skeleton of the building, but also the foundational element of the building that enables the building to stand for a long-lasting time, that can have bio-based materials so that it can already have sort of lower carbon impact. Or what if the building systems and the ceilings can be combined in a way that we can actually eliminate the use of additional materials that we typically use today? And what if the facade can actually enable the building to breathe so that we can have more of the sort of help what the kind of systems would do to do it more passively? So that we really, I think it's very difficult to explain it without visuals, but I think our sort of the vision behind it is very clearly described in the sort of diagrams that we produce for the urban sequoia model. And I think the important aspect of it is not that every aspect of the building absorbs more than one function, but that it is designed to be adaptable to changing needs, so that the true sort of long-term benefit of it not only becoming is this better? This is better, yeah. So that not only every part of the building serves more than one function, but also it has a longer lasting impact because it is designed to be adaptable to changing needs. And I think this is how we can get to a beyond net zero carbon target today. And I think maybe lastly I should also mention that of course we're leveraging existing technologies, emerging technologies such as the carbon capture to be able to go below net zero. Because even in our analysis, even today, if we design in the most intelligent and creative and efficient manner, we can get to a 90% reduction on a 40-story building, which is the model that we studied. In a shorter building, we will get beyond net zero, perhaps with the intelligent design, but in a taller building, it's impossible to get there. The carbon impact of the existing materials. So there we actually leverage the carbon dioxide with their capture technologies to absorb the carbon from the atmosphere to go beyond net zero.
Thanks, Midan. It's really helpful that you just elaborated that. And some of those graphs and images that will further sort of explain this will be shared in the presentation afterwards. But I think it's very important that you point out that it also requires a paradigm shift, right? Looking at cities as ecosystems in a way, and buildings as kind of organisms, right? That are part of that ecosystem and that are very much sort of in a kind of living environment, operating in the living environment. Now, Joe, the group has of course also ventured significantly into this direction. You've done a lot on the carbon reduction roadmap development, for example, as I understand, a lot on the day-to-day solutions projects. Can you elaborate a little bit on how the company is looking at this topic and what your thoughts are on the Carbon 6 Cities vision.
So in terms of how Arab is looking at it as a whole, we have a publication that came out about 5 years ago called the 3 R's. And when I first saw the 3 R's, I went, oh no, it's reduce, reuse, recycle. But we said actually, we're going to collapse all of those R's into the first R, which is reduce. And that's like the flow of water into a sink. The next R is restore, which is the plants and animals, the natural environment, which is the storage, and that's like the size of the basin. And even as we reduce the tap flow and the basin remains fixed, we're still sloshing over the edges. And so we need to start opening up the tap at the bottom so we can flow out a lot faster. And that's the remove that we needed to accelerate that. And to me, when I saw that, I had a little bit of grief, the same way as when I started to accept that adaptation was something we needed to do alongside mitigation. But now I know, stop with the feelings, let's get on with it. Stop with the feelings, get on with it, let's do removals, open up that sink tap. One of our competitors, and I won't mention, set themselves a goal to make sure that all of their designs and projects were net zero. And I thought that was an enormous task because in Australia, where I'm from, we're still building roads, we're still building rail, we're still building ports, and a lot of the rest of the world are still doing this big infrastructure development. And to me, that's really about concrete. So concrete is actually a great material. It's durable, it's strong, it's local, but it's at the moment very, very carbon intensive. And so in my role as climate and sustainability leader, I allocated a huge chunk of our research into finding solutions that seem to work in the lab and getting them piloted on the major projects that we're working on. If you look at any government budget, a huge proportion of that budget is the building of major capital works, and that's a really fantastic playground for us to pilot removals. Just 0.5% of a Wackendig roads budget gets a long way with these sorts of projects. And so across all the projects for roads and rail, I put forward, along with contractors, this commitment to pilot, to measure, and then to release that kind of monitoring information so that people could really know what it's like to do a particular type of concrete, which mineralizes over time, displaces cement, in a real structural application. And for a lot of our government clients, they will buy that, so it's a factor of competitive advantage as well. And also we share the risk. So if we articulate the fact that this is risky and we need government to do some of that de-risking, the contractor will take some of the risk, I will take some of that risk, and the universities will keep tracking of it so that it's all public knowledge, then it works really well. So my big thing is to use big public investment to do the piloting.
I like that a lot, thank you. And that kind of risk distribution approach makes also a lot of sense because the reality is that, SOM and in a room, they may be leaders in the space, they may be ambassadors, they may want to, go above and beyond, but at the end of the day, you're dependent on so many other stakeholders, right? So can you elaborate a little bit on, what you are experiencing as the main barriers, the potential solutions to overcoming those barriers when it comes to pursuing the vision, the Carbon 6 Cities vision, everything that we just discussed.
The barrier that we're seeing is we can develop all these pilot studies, that will be one. But I think if they're not implemented, if they're not piloted, then they don't become real. And if they don't become real, they cannot be scaled. They cannot be made mainstream. And we need mainstream. We need a lot of these ambitions that they're by ambitions today to be made mainstream, to be able to scale the decarbonization and to deliver that faster than pace. And I think the key barrier for us is to get the investments channeled into these pilot projects, because a lot of the investors see them as risk. First of all, perhaps insurance companies play a big role in this equation to be able to get them on board, to really understand the implications of some of these decisions, and design solutions that we're offering out there are actually can mitigate some of the risks that are seen, but there are perceived risks of untested materials or untested solutions. Like for example, in our Municipal Power, we are relying on a bio-based material that is being currently developed and has been tested for structural fire purposes, but it's not on the shelf in the market that you can buy today. It's a material that is it's a concrete alternative that is produced using an algae-based ingredients, for lack of a description. I'm not a material scientist. But I think to be able to use that material, we need insurers to be able to insure that material so that we can deliver a real built case pilot project so that others can see how it's done. And we can also learn and we can have sort of close the feedback loop, we have the lessons learned to be able to feed into other solutions out there. And I think so it's the investors and the insurers that need to get on board and to be able to channel the right money into the places, but also the right approach on how to deliver some of these solutions. Because we have ideas and we test them on paper, and they're very deliverable from our perspective, but it's about realizing them and making them real. So I think we need to, I always say that as designers, engineers, or urban planners, we really need to be able to extend our sphere of influence and engagement, and to talk about how do we deliver that with insurance, with investors, and even policymakers down the line. Because policymakers and regulators are the main, I think, stakeholders that can enable some of these solutions to become mainstream. But for that, they need build-it and test examples. And for that to happen, we need insurers and investors to be able to enable us to make these dreams a reality.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So intensifying, value chain collaboration combined with the risk distribution architecture that Joan already mentioned as well, and getting these insurers and reinsurers, I'm sure, involved. Joan, what are you seeing as the main barriers and potential solutions?
The main barrier is time. So when we do a project, as soon as you start, it's too late. There's a lot of this work looking at standards, understanding what the solution is, what the mixes are. It takes time, and once you're in competition or delivery, it's too late. And so somehow we as an industry need to maintain that knowledge and momentum in between our projects where the money comes in. And so sometimes when we work with government, the way that works really well is when you have a program of work. So a program of multiple projects where you keep relationships and conversations going in between projects, but you still have the certainty that there will be spending and investment. So a program approach to trialing, piloting, and then scaling, and then rolling out. So I'll give you maybe an example. This is really industrial. This is industrial policy, basically. My home state is Victoria. We have a program called Ecologic IQ at the end, and that's creating new supply chains and new innovations through transparent programs of work that exist as capability in the industry. Like there's a build to that, and they sustain the build with a steady pipeline of projects. And so that level of pipeline transparency, risk transfer, the ability to work on standards and paths in between projects, that program scale is the way we do new things.
Yeah, bringing you certainty of revenue as well, because at the end of the day, you're still a private sector company, right? Yeah. No, that's very, very, very helpful. And I guess myself, I thought about this too. I think there's something around sort of regulatory sandboxing as well, right? So allowing this kind of experimentation as well with larger scale projects still, but in an environment that is very futuristic. So combining all of these things, and I hope somebody is noting them down, because we need to turn these into advocacy letters at the end of the day, right? But I know we have a few people from government also in the room, so that certainly helps. Now, would you like to, I know we're running out of time, would you like to share any parting thoughts with the audience before we close up and go to the presentation?
I think I'd just say some of the solutions already exist. Not all of this is innovation. And what we've learned is, as designers, we have a responsibility to design more cleverly and not just copy and paste what we did last time. And so that's understanding the materials and how they perform. And then instead of saying, we'll just use general concrete or we'll use timber, and then kind of smear it across our project, to apply those sorts of solutions, systems as a palette, like an artist palette. so that we can paint more precisely, that kind of design innovation and that willingness to do something which costs us a lot of cognitive burden, it's our responsibility. And we need to reach out to the solution providers to do that.
And maybe I should also add that it's important for every one of us to work here as representatives, have some of the leading organizations as Arab and SON, that it's really important for us and others to share their tested solutions and their tested ideas to a certain extent, because that's the only way we can really help each other to scale the impact. We need to be able to much more transparently share rather than sort of keeping everything behind closed doors, which has been the industry's typical practice. Because I think raising awareness on some of the solutions, and I really appreciate events such as COP and panels such as this one today, because it's an opportunity for us to learn from each other, and it's a critical part of the success story, and it's really the success story of our sector globally around the world once we can raise awareness around these solutions and these ideas, and also build capacity around those ideas.
Super, thank you so much, and expect an email from me, because we'll be trying to bring companies such as you under the umbrella of the City CDR Initiative to facilitate that kind of collaboration and stakeholder ecosystem building, because that is what we're doing as well, right? Building a new stakeholder ecosystem. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been exciting, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Great. So, now I'm supposed to give a presentation and somehow sort of, meet this very high bar that John and that was just set by John and Mina, but I'll do my best. Now, why am I giving the presentation here? This is not just for fun. It is also because the City CDR Initiative, and I'll elaborate a little bit on the nature of the initiative, but we are about to launch a second report in a three-part report series on pathways to carbon-sink cities. Now, the first was the vision document that we spoke about just now, and was developed with a bunch of partners, including SOM, Conservation International, UNI Climate Champions, Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, and X-Prize, and now we are launching a need gap analysis, which is really understanding sort of what are the needs, what are the gaps in terms of realizing carbon-sink cities. It's an assessment that hasn't been done obviously at this scale yet, because the whole idea of carbon-sink cities, building on the shoulders of giants, is a new vision, is a new concept. Now the third part in this report series will be published before the end of this year, and it's going to be an implementation guide for city officials, municipal administrations, to understand how they can realize carbon-sink cities. So, just to make sure that we're all on the same line here, right? So a bit of a kind of science-based contextualization. Clearly, we need to distinguish between mitigation, between reduction and removal, even though both are forms of climate change mitigation. And then there is climate resilience and adaptation. These are three distinct areas of climate action, and it is very important that they're kept distinct as well, because they serve different purposes. Emission reduction is about reducing or emitting less CO2. It's about decreasing the CO2 that is already concentrated in the atmosphere today, historical emissions, right? Climate resilience is about addressing external impacts as a result of climate change and continuing to prosper as a society, as cities. But of course there are ways of integrating them. There are forms of integrated planning, there are synergies that can be realized, and we'll touch on that a little bit today. And the City CDR Initiative then is a global effort, non-profit effort, bringing together cities, civil society organizations, and project and technology developers to advance carbon removal in urban and peri-urban environments. And our aim is to empower cities with the right kind of tools to pursue this path and scale CDR systematically, responsibly, and in synergy with other urban priorities. In a way, it's an accelerator program, because at the end of the day we want the largest city networks of this world, C40s, Global Covenant, ICLE, to do this, but there may not yet be a critical mass of city members asking them to pursue this in a way that we think is necessary. Hence, the City CDR Initiative. Now, I hope that by the end of this decade, these three city networks and others, including UN Habitat, have fully absorbed this, and what we are doing can be a stepping stone for them to do that. And we are working currently with about 20 cities from 4 different continents, primarily North American, European, and 3 in Latin America, and in Australia. I expect we'll have more cities joining in the future. Of course, for Global South cities, it's maybe a slightly different ballgame. So, but we are working and discussing with cities from the Global South to join as well. We are still in a kind of opportunity baseline research phase, which is why we have these 3 reports that were published. Now, just to make sure that we are talking about the same thing here in terms of definitions, right? I want to, let's say, circumscribe a little bit the area of CDR that we are talking about, both in terms of agency, which is the first part, City CDR, and in terms of, let's say, the area or the physical implementation opportunity of CDR private sinks in the urban environment, which we have called urban CDR. Now, in both cases, I think we are talking about activities that exist, both within jurisdictional boundaries and in part beyond it. The city has influence both within its urban environment and jurisdictional borders and beyond it. In terms of urban CDR, so the physical implementation, project value chains may have capture taking place within the jurisdictional boundaries and storage outside it, or vice versa. The CO2 may be captured, from outside the city's boundaries and stored within. And so, I think this is important that we have these definitions lined up for ourselves. And context, I think some of you are familiar with this, or it might be a lot of text, but I think it's important. The IPCC says 3 rules for CDR: short-term, accelerate climate change mitigation today, all of which is complementary, obviously, to emission reductions, right? So short-term, accelerate climate change mitigation today. Medium-term, balance residual emissions in order to reach net zero. Long-term, remove CO2 out of the atmosphere and actively reduce the amount of concentration CO2 that's concentrated in the atmosphere, and thereby addressing climate overshoot, because we are likely going to go into climate overshoot, and the only way to address this is through carbon removal. There's no other way, really. And the IPCC has said we'll need approximately 10 gigatons of annual removals by 2050. Now, obviously, we're nowhere near that number. But, we have to keep hope, we have to keep working on this, and I hope that what we're doing with the City CDR Initiative, in part contributes to that. Helps, ultimately, cities to contribute to active climate restoration efforts, bringing down CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere to pre-industrial levels. And this global governance is obviously goes beyond climate action per se. This is also about environmental justice considerations. This is about loss and damages. This is about the just transition. And there is that restoration component that feeds into those various discussions. And we need to keep that in mind, that this is not just some climate tech discussion, because, that would be the wrong way to go when it comes to CDR. What is the scale of the opportunity here? These are early estimates. This has not been assessed, at large, right? So first we have in terms of the demand estimate. There's a kind of hook we can use, which is the EU Climate Neutral Cities mission. It's an attempt to have 100 cities achieve climate neutrality by 2030. The only sort of quasi-compliance frameworks for cities to achieve climate neutrality with that kind of depth. And they say, well, if you want to reach that, then you can have no more than 20% residual emissions. You have to balance those with sinks or buying carbon removal credits from outside your city. Now, there were about 304 eligible cities, and they submitted their emission calculations, and in total there was about 642 million tons of CO2 equivalent, scope 1 and 2 emissions, which translates to about 2.1 million tons of equivalent CO2 emissions annually per city. Now, applying that 20% rule, that means that we are talking about 0.42 million tons of of residual emissions annually per city. Aggregate that, we reach a total of 120 million tons of carbon removal needs that these cities have in order to achieve climate neutrality. Again, this is 304 cities. If we then apply this to the Race to Zero campaign and extrapolate this, so this is 1,145 cities, we're talking about a total carbon removal need of almost 500 million annual carbon removals in order for all these cities to become climate neutral. That is the scale of the demand we are talking about. It is large, it is quite significant, and it should send a signal also to developers out there, to investors out there, to cities out there, you know, what is needed to help make this happen. Because the supply opportunity is there. Again, early estimates, 2 studies that were put out, one by the Potsdam Research Institute, estimated based on a relatively narrow portfolio of carbon removal methods in urban CDR deployment pathways, approximately a gigatons of removals that can be realized annually. Another study that was put out earlier this year estimated that if we replace all traditional building materials in some ideal world with some CO2 storing alternatives, then the upper bound, theoretical upper bound of carbon removal supply or potential is as high as 16 gigatons now, annually. I think what this says is that, how I interpret this, is that the scale of potential supply is huge, but we are really finding our way. We really don't know exactly. We just know that it is sizable. And so in terms of a research agenda, you know, this is one critical point that we need to investigate further to understand what that true potential is. Because it sends a signal to investors that we need private sector money, obviously, going into this. Now, this is part of an article that I've been writing with the Potsdam Research Institute. We've now submitted for publication. But what it aims to show is, I think it's a kind of elaboration of what a carbon sink city could look like, right? In terms of the various carbon removal / storage or sequestration opportunities in and around the urban environment. We are talking about enhanced rock weathering on rooftops and bio-based construction materials, a lot of which Joan and Mina already mentioned, right? You know, indoor direct air capture units integrated with HVAC systems. Of course, there's urban forestation, urban green corridors and blue corridors as well. We have biochar additions that can be deployed in urban soils, parks, and again, rooftops. We have alkalinity enhancement and other direct ocean capture solutions in wastewater treatment facilities. These solutions, again, are, as Joan already mentioned earlier, not all, mainly not really, just in the innovation space. They have been demonstrated, although perhaps not deployed at scale yet, which is the stage we are now moving towards. And you know, and I hope David from XPRIZE, who has been running a carbon removal competition for about 4 years, has something to say about sort of how we go about transitioning from that innovation space to that, you know, that scale-up space. Now, if we then take the other scale, which is the building unit level that we already spoke a bit about before with the urban design firms, we see again, you know, a wide number of an array of solutions that can be integrated in the very fabric of buildings. You know, we are talking about making buildings net negative. Timber, bioconcrete, biogenic composites that are you know, part of the very structure, the very fabric of the buildings and the foundation of these buildings. We're talking about, again, integrated deck and HVAC systems and using biochar as aggregates in construction materials and so forth. There is an end to it, so I won't say there's no end to it. But it is a long list of solutions, one that a lot of people do not have front of mind. Why not? Because we have not been shouting this off the rooftops, because this has not been a you know, a topic of research, of policy making to date, which is something that we at the City CDR Initiative obviously hope to change. Now, changing is also about changing the way that city officials, that decision makers look at unlocking this opportunity. This is not about stacking in a new area of climate action, of an urban priority, on top of already a stretched municipal agenda, a budget that is so spread so thin. No, this is about integrating horizontally carbon removal across a wide array of other policy domains, from industrial policy and planning policy to health policy and other forms of environmental policy beyond climate. This is about designing our policies in such a way, when it comes to CDR, that the impact of it is multiplied across a number of different urban priorities, which is the way to sell it also to citizens, of course. Not because, we say we need to restore the climate for everyone's sake. No normal citizen will want the public coffins to be open for that. No, they want sort of effects in their front yard. And we can deploy in their front yard too. We call them front yard projects as a kind of play on NIMBYism. Convincing people that they accept front yard projects is about building social legitimacy for carbon removal at scale, something that can translate into securing buy-in for national level carbon removal at scale as well. Because cities or local governments have an immense amount of agency in there. If only you understand where you are in terms of the amount of control and in terms of the amount of influence that you can leverage, right? So this is about understanding where you are in relation to the CDR stakeholder ecosystem, based on what is, a term that is used, your capacity to act, which relates really to legal competences, political competences, fiscal competences, and so forth. And we have identified 6 particular sort of archetypical roles. So there's the strategizer. We'll have the city of Helsinki in a moment on a panel. They can be categorized as a strategizer. They have a lot of capacity to act. They have a lot of stuff they can do within their sphere of control. And then all the way on the other hand, we have identified the convener, a city which has few powers, levels of power that can be used within their sphere of control, and they have to operate much more within their sphere of influence. But by understanding that that is their position, they can make the most out of it. They can harness all these opportunities in the most appropriate way, rather than saying, we have such weak power, such weak capacity to act. No, it is about understanding your exact role in that ecosystem in order to play your part as a city government. Because developers need you. In our study, in our survey with developers that are part of the City CDR Initiative, which is currently 18 project and technology developers, they said that the amount of support we receive now is nothing, it's suboptimal. The amount of support that we need is huge. We need, what do we need? We need, we need cities to act as partners, and we need cities to act as advocates towards regional governments, towards national governments, towards international governments, within city networks, as well as towards the private sector. Because these developers, they are startups, they are small, they do not have that leverage that municipal governments have. And so some of the areas you see here are of course around local regulatory support. This is about local carbon tax schemes. This is about data sharing agreements. Who would have known, right, that that's what developers need, what they needed, that's what they indicated. This is about public-private partnerships around innovation and so forth. This is about, ultimately, as I mentioned before, national policy advocacy as well. So a lot of opportunities or needs that developers have from local governments. And so there is a kind of call to action for them to step up. But the reality is that they face their own challenges, obviously. They are, of course, not in a place to just, how can I put this? Municipal governments tend to be poor. They don't have deep pockets. They don't have a lot of money to spend. So they lack the funding to deploy in such new areas of climate action. And so they have to become creative. They have to attract funding from other places. But we have found that the city climate finance landscape isn't currently geared towards funding CDR projects in cities. Again, the governance gap here. Municipal governments, they say we don't have the space. Many of them are built super dense, right? So where do we deploy these CDR projects? Well, it's also because they don't really always know about all the CDR pathways that are possible. So there's a piece of awareness raising here as well. It is about lack of capacity and human resource, and so there is there are challenges that they face when it comes to municipal agency in action, and there are also institutional challenges. Lack of awareness internally with other departments. Their waste management departments, they would know nothing about CDR. Obviously, their public health department would know nothing about CDR. So there is this internal awareness raising piece here. Financial capacity, GHG accounting and MRV, GHG protocol doesn't have any guidance on how to integrate CDR in your city GHG inventory. The SBTI doesn't validate science-based targets of cities. These are big problems, right? And these are again governance gaps that they face. And so if we extrapolate from all of that and we look at what we call the multi-level governance of net zero, and then particularly that CDR component, that residual emissions component, right, let alone climate overshoot, we see that city governments are not being equipped to actually pursue this, even if they want to. And so they do their best, and Ina will talk a little bit about that. They do their best within the opportunities that they have. They collaborate, they form coalitions, and the City CDR Initiative is in a way an example of that. But at the end of the day, that is not going to be enough, right? We need to close these governance gaps, and we need to do that fast in order to empower cities to realize that. And part of what we can do in the interim is build that new urban CDR stakeholder ecosystem. These are some of the types of sort of stakeholders that we believe are critically important in that context, and we are trying to bring together, because this is a whole of administration approach. This is a whole of society approach that we need. This is about developing participatory governance mechanisms to involve communities. This is about creating those public-private partnerships and developing platforms for urban CDR project value chain collaboration, allowing for seamless interaction around the supply chains, around the logistical needs that are huge, that are often not considered from the get-go when we start designing projects. So this is about a new ecosystem. Now, I've spoken a lot, way too much probably. If you want to learn more about it, check out our email there and our website, carbon6cities.com, where we'll publish the report as well. There's a lot of great assets there already. I hope that you enjoyed this little sort of venture here. But I would like to now ask Chris here, my collaborator, my partner in crime, to invite the panelists and take it away. Thank you, Chris. So you guys can hear me all day. Yeah, for our third panel, we'll come up. Big hand for Christian. Christian was really, those of people who are in the carbon world know Christian, multiple facets, but Christian, me, and a handful of other people, some that were on the previous panel, who really did this idea of cities being the vanguard of CDR for all the reasons that you laid out. We've been pushing out this for a long time, and it's really starting to come to fruition. And not only did everything you say really resonate, man, did they have good graphics. I gotta say, I don't know who does your branding, but the color scheme and everything is great. But if I can invite the other folks that are on my panel to come up, and I will sit over on this side. And I think we might have had a little bit of a switch in, you were not Leia, but you were representing. Yeah, oh, I'm really loud, so. Can you guys hear me? A little choppy. There should be other microphones you might have to pass around a little bit. All right, great. So with our panel right now, we're gonna do is a great mix, I think, of practitioners operating on different levels that are bringing different assets into this venture of carbon removal and cities. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to have everybody kind of introduce themselves first, and we'll go on a line, and then we'll get right into the conversation. So I'll go ahead and start down at the end here, and speak loudly, as you know, when I'm meeting with singers.
So my name is Ina Olik. I work for the climate unit of the City of Helsinki. We've been part of the City CDR from the beginning, I think. And on top of that, we've already, our climate targets are such that we have an 85% emission reduction target for 2030, and we have a net zero target for 2040, and we also look beyond that. And the carbon removals are definitely something that we need in order
fantastic. Dr. David Madison from X Prize.
Good afternoon. I'm David Madison. I'm with X Prize. I lead the Energy, Climate, Nature domain at X Prize. We most recently ran a $100 million carbon dioxide removal X Prize competition. We announced the winners of that in April of this year. Going forward, one of the things that we see as an important element of growing the negative emissions industry is to identify all the different places, even passively, that we can build in negative emissions pathways and carbon removal pathways. And so the presentation that was just presented about all of the opportunity spaces in urban environments presents that shift in paradigm. And it is, the thing is we're thinking about now is what are the innovations that are going to be necessary to enable embedding more of these solutions into our built environment, into our municipal infrastructure, and scaling those for impact. So, excellent. Asif.
Thank you. Hi everyone, nice to be here. Asif Shah, representing the Global Government of Mayors. I work on an initiative called GEM, but I'm here today on behalf of my colleague Georgia Rumpelli, who's the director of the Urban Transitions Mission, which is run as a partnership between GCOM and the European Commission. It's a network, a global network of, or a global cohort of cities around the world, 118 cities, that really collaborate and look to connect their needs, challenges, with solutions that exist in the public and private sector. So CDR I know is a priority for the UTM, and there's already been some work, but look forward to reporting back on the outcomes of this conversation.
Wonderful to have you here, Asif. And Bernard.
Hello everyone, my name is Bernard Bard. I am leading UN Habitat's climate change team. I am working with Leah. She works for me. UN Habitat's climate work has three main pillars. One of them is multi-level climate action, multi-level governance. That's why we're here at the COP. It includes the global engagement of cities, governments, stakeholders in these processes. But it also includes the integration of the local issues in NPCs. We'll talk a little bit about that. The second pillar is the science and innovation access. Again, linking very much to the agenda. Here, say a few words on that as well, how we can connect better. The third pillar is really the biggest part. This is integrating the climate change agenda across all of UN Habitat's work, but also piloting projects and programs to advance this agenda.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We're going to start down with Lena, which is really important. But one thing I have to just mention is, when we do CDR 2018, that UN, can you guys hear every other word? Let me grab the other one here and see if that works a little better. All right, that should work. When we talk about CDR for a long time now, it's been quite obvious that we have to do CDR on a large scale, including many novel ways of doing it. So whenever we're talking about this or advocating with governments, corporates, it's a real going uphill. And you look for who are those positive outliers, who are the ones that get it first and move it forward. And so I want to ask a question just to you is, why has Helsinki been early to CDR, and not just the reasons that you said about what we need to do it, because we know that, but there has to be something about Helsinki that led to the city moving very early on CDR and incorporating it. I'd love to hear that story.
Well, I always say that the most important thing in a city is that you have the mandate from the leadership. So our carbon neutrality plans were put into the city strategy 9 years ago, and first had a 2035 goal, then the 30 goal, but we already have the net zero goal and the beyond carbon negativity goals in the city strategy for the past 5 years. And when you look at the emissions and you know how much you can reduce, and even if we go towards zero, we know that our carbon sinks, we have about, by 2030, they will amount to about 10% of the remaining emissions. So we know that as a growing city, we can't much increase them, so we need other technical solutions. So that's what we've been looking into for the past couple of years. And it's just understanding the big picture that this is needed. So I think that gives us so we have the political mandate or the decisions from the leadership, and then we understood that we have to figure out the roadmap of getting here.
And what are some of the tools on the policy and program support side that you're implementing? And which CDR pathways are those really enhancing?
Yeah, so now we are looking into things. So we have some cities, especially in the north of Europe, that are having bioenergy CCS implemented in their cities. We know that our energy company is not looking into that. So that would be the big thing to do. So we have to figure out the smaller ways. So we are looking into biochar, we are looking into buildings as carbon storages, thinking about if we could actually regulate that for all the buildings and so on, to actually ask construction companies to a particular amount of carbon that would be stored in buildings and so on. So we're still in the research phase, so we know a little bit that a lot of some things have been implemented. We are using biochar, we are using carbon negative on the lower concrete in all of our infrastructure projects and so on. But it takes a while to get all of those things going, so that's why the research project is also very good, and then we have information and can make the calculations that we can then put into actual reality.
One other key thing that relates back to a point that Christian brought up is, and it's really to Helsinki's credit, is that you're kind of not only building the plane while you're flying around those solutions, but we know if you have a target for net zero or whatever it is, measurement. It's all about the measurement and the standards. And carbon removal, while we're trying to advance the technologies of carbon removal, we're also trying to get clarity on our standards and how we measure it. So I wonder, in the absence of there being a more integrated role for CDR within the standards that a lot of cities sort of leverage in order to calculate, how are you dealing with those kind of data or measurement gaps?
Well, like I said, we've run our own research on things as well. So we just did a research on how much biochar we could maximum use in the city, and also calculations on how much CO2 that would remove, and that only amounts to about 2.5 to 3% of the remaining residual emissions by 2030. So we are doing those things, so we are getting research in different fields, but like I said, we don't have all of the information yet, but that's one of the things that we need to do, because we want to present the politicians with possibilities of how to get to these goals that we've set, and for that we really need a lot, and we usually work a lot with data and try to give them very clear scenarios so that they understand what we need to do, but for that there's still spaces that we don't have, plenty spaces.
The final question I think will transfer very well to our two other panelists. One of the things that's really remarkable about cities, if you take them by themselves, people at a very high level will be like, just a city. But cities talk to each other, and there's a ripple effect and influence, and they work together all the time and share ideas. So I'm just curious, what kind of impact do you see Helsinki having on other peer cities? Are people knocking on your door and saying, how are you doing this? Why are you doing this?
So first of all, we've learned from other cities. Like I said, when we set this, the latest target for, we used to call it carbon neutrality, 80% reduction. Didn't know what to do with the 20%. Now we've set it to 85% reduction, and we are now 20%, and the rest will be done with negative emissions. But we didn't really set because of the lack of data yet for what we can achieve by 2030. But we got that idea from Stockholm and also Copenhagen, who, like I said, have things, but they are calculating it like that. So it was a new thinking. But we have, for example, all of the Finnish cities asking us, how are you doing? What are the real implementations of this? And I think there's lots of other cities that, as long as this work comes out, because for any other things that we've done, there's a lot of cities that want to learn how we do things, how we think about it, how we structure it, how we make the plans.
Fantastic, great. And Asif, I'll go to you as well about that sort of phenomenon that I was just really describing. Maybe you could first talk a little bit about how the network of mayors actually works. And what are those sort of horizontal ties when we see a sort of a jump or a flow of an idea from one city communicated through the mayoral sort of level? I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure, thank you so much. So GCOM, the Global Coalition of Mayors, is a global alliance of local governments and cities. So we're up to almost 14,000 cities across the world from 150 plus countries. And so this is a cohort that isn't defined by a specific size of city or a specific region. It's across the board, big, medium, small, and the work that we support cities in doing is really helping them across every step of their mitigation, adaptation, and energy access planning journey. And so when it comes to the Urban Transitions mission, this is obviously something that falls under mission and innovation, but the reason it makes so much sense for GCOM to be one of the co-leads is because of that network of cities around the world that we have access to, that we supported over the last decade, who really are constantly looking for new ways of doing things, of addressing problems, of finding solutions, and often don't necessarily have access to the knowledge about those solutions or who you can talk to about implementing specific solutions. I think the UTM, therefore, is not a network, it's an initiative, but it works with this cohort of 118 cities across nearly 50 countries. And it acts as a knowledge broker. So listening to cities, understanding their needs, assessing the gaps in their knowledge and their technical capabilities, and then helping to connect those gaps to opportunities, to resources that partners in our Global Innovation Alliance for UTM may have access to. So just to answer that last part of your question, some of the, I think the biggest value of a cohort like UTM under Network of GCOM is it brings cities together who may be looking at the same problem from different angles, in different contexts, but who might find value in their mutual experiences.
And hugely important to be able to have that. And one thing I am curious about, because I always sort of pinch myself when the likes of your organizations and initiatives where CDR is really starting to land or penetrate. I know it's very early days, but and this is very hard, but the sample size you're talking about there, 14,000 cities that you're interacting with, how would you characterize the sort of state of CDR discourse or knowledge or interest? Again, that's almost impossible to answer given the number of cities, but if there's anything you could attempt.
Yeah, so I think looking specifically at the 118 that are part of the UTM, I think over the past couple of years, it's been really a scoping phase to understand what that base level of knowledge and understanding about CDR is, and I don't think there is a great deal about all the different aspects of CDR that cities are familiar with. I think most of the knowledge that exists around nature-based solutions, around renewable infrastructure, maybe a little bit around direct air capture, though that's still, I think, pretty early stages. There's an example from Porto Alegre in Brazil of a small-scale DAC facility that's been set up. There's examples from Stockholm on biochar, circular biochar that used for tree planting on streets. And so that's an example also of the co-benefits that CDR has, not just of carbon, but
30% reduction in premature death rate of urban trees by using biochar. Just you probably know about that a little bit, but there's been some good research on that. But
yes, but I think what has happened as a result of this engagement with the cities in the cohort is those priorities have emerged, right? So I think green and blue infrastructure, small-scale, decentralized DAC facilities, specifically looking at places where there are industrial ports or waste-to-energy plants where those DAC facilities can be installed directly. and nature-based solutions, I think.
Joan referenced concrete and CDR. That is my sweet spot there. It's something that cities can really do quite well. Thanks. And Bernard, to you as well, when we look at, for us it's a major indicator of the maturation when UN Habitat is thinking about and engaging in CDR. And just to kind of a very similar question that I raised with Asif, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the sort of state of that, what the prioritization and how it is that CDR is beginning to emerge internally.
Yes. Now, obviously, this is a very recent engagement with you, of course, not in terms of the bigger topic, but it is not a priority. I think if I could maybe start with some of the big conversations that we've had here at the COP. We've just had our ministerial meeting on urbanization and climate change, the fourth of this kind. And the emphasis, of course, this has always been about bringing cities to the table. It's about the multi-level climate action. It's about bringing solutions also into the COP processes. But it has been relatively high level. This year round, it's been much more detailed. We've had in total 11 events that led to the high-level process activity, which is about the political declarations. And the buildings roundtable, the nature roundtable in there, of course, carbon capture has been a topic, not the most prominent one, but it's certainly there. But it's also important to see that other topics in terms of the multi-level governance, in terms of climate finance, they start integrating those topics more from a systems perspective rather than as an entry point.
Yeah.
But I think that's what we want, right?
Yes.
We want to connect those points. There are other sectoral entry points that lend themselves also for connecting further dots. That's really the big picture. We have also launched our NDC analysis. Again, the entry point of carbon capture, carbon removal is not so prominent. We've mentioned that before, but I think it is important to see that we've come a very long way with the NDCs in terms of addressing the urban dimension. We've had in the NDCs 2.0, 27% of NDCs that looked at that had a strong urban content. Now, with the sample size that we had by the middle of October, 67 NDCs, that has doubled. So that is a fantastic trajectory. We've done some quick analysis of the NDCs that have come in. Since then, there's also a very strong positive trajectory to be seen. Maybe I divert a little bit there. There are, of course, more to come. And having these conversations and showcasing what's possible, of course, also provides hopefully some incentive to join that club of NDCs that have a strong urban content. There are areas that are particularly important for this conversation, housing being one of them, where we've seen a doubling of mental and planning increase, and now 70% of NPCs mention the built environment. So all of this is really good news. Maybe just to say that where we see a big concern is that informal settlements aren't mentioned to the extent necessary, and that urban finance is mentioned in about 50% of NDCs, but as a very broad requirement towards implementation, not the systems. It's not about the how-to, it's just we need finance. And so I think this is something to really engage much more strongly. Let me just maybe finalize this segment. We are now looking also at the implementation side of things that's moving forward very quickly, how to translate NPCs now into urban implementation plans at the national level and at the local level. And I should have mentioned this much more. My first sentence really on all of this, we're working very closely with the global covenant of affairs because it is about getting cities engaged in this. And another area,
That's good.
on a partnership with the global covenant of affairs is the integration of the local knowledge, the local dimension, the local practice into the IPCC report. I think this is critically important in terms of the dissemination. Even if the IPCC reports are very technical, if it's there, we are already working very closely together towards the dissemination of that knowledge. Our partnership on the Innovate for Cities and the Global Research and Action Agenda, which identifies the big gaps, unfortunately is very, very thin on carbon capture, which we have out of, I think, 400 areas that are needed in terms of policy action and research. In research, and only one speaks to that topic. But I think as we are just really at the early phase of the IPCC report, very happy to work together, get this very strongly into the IPCC's report on cities and climate change in cities, and I think from that into the dissemination.
Yeah, I think you said something really important about not only local knowledge, but local idiosyncrasies between places. You know, a Helsinki versus a Albany, New York, or a Denver, or a Moscow, or a Nairobi. What CDR's evolution is about contact with the real world. You could say, here's the engineer's technology, but what do places think about those technologies, and how do they sort of hack or tweak them a little bit? So I think that's where cities also really come into place, in these local points that are differentiating from each other. So, David, I got to ask you. So, X Prize, Eddie Carter was just a historically important moment and process in the history of carbon removal was the X Prize. Not just the awards it gave out, but it just brought so many things into focus and made so many things visible. I was lucky to be a technical reviewer on that. And so the Carbon X Prize was just an enormous moment in the history of this sector. And to hear that there's now an interest of looking at how this sort of translates into the specific instance of cities. So I just have to ask you a very plain question. What is leading you to kind of look at the City CDR thing?
Well, the reason we're looking at it is for the reasons you see right here. There is interest among many different types of entities in accommodating and incorporating carbon removal into their strategic plans for achieving emission reductions and their climate goals. And where there is demand, there is often a disconnect between what are the available technologies that would actually meet the ambitions that they have. And so there's an opportunity for innovation. We are thinking about this because looking at the scope of what is possible in terms of what cities could do and what infrastructure could do in terms of helping to serve a very large negative emissions capacity can be benefited by innovation. I imagine a targeted prize that could benefit the types of technologies that could be adopted by cities and municipalities would be something that would be very interesting and would activate innovators around the world. So looking at specifically technologies that are passive in removing and mitigating carbon dioxide, like some of the cement or HVAC DAC and other things like that, as well as perhaps a component that looks at the active opportunity spaces where municipalities have great control over large amounts of biogenic carbon. And one of those would be in municipal waste. Changing the paradigm from waste management to actually viewing that as a stream of carbon, biogenic carbon, that can be stabilized and stored, would fundamentally change, but we don't have the technologies to actively be able to deploy that at scale, or for cities to have a low enough risk tolerance for accommodating that into their plans. We need innovation. So that's why XPRIZE is looking at this, because we know that if there were the technologies and solutions, all of the demand by all of these entities exists, and they would scale.
Yeah, this is I'm just going to ask you. It wasn't on the list here, but I know it'll resonate with you. So many different submissions for the XPRIZE, the Carbon XPRIZE, across so many different pathways. I'm wondering, was there anything in that really popped out that was like that you can really think of as solutions that are urban, that actually came out of the XPRIZE, that have a particular sort of urban relevance?
There's not one that was in the XPRIZE, but actually I was thinking of a particular professor at University of North Carolina, Joe Sawkins, who's been developing this paradigm shift in how we do organic waste management. For a long time, when I was studying, I'm a chemical engineer, when I was studying waste conversion technologies, the paradigm was always like, how do we maximize the energy recovery from organics through anaerobic digestion and other things like that? Well, in an environment where we have a large negative emissions industry, it turns out that the value of carbon in biomass, in a world where the price of carbon is above $40 a ton, the value in biomass is in the carbon and not in the embodied energy. So those paradigms and technologies we have to recover energy are actually recovering the wrong thing. And so what he was focusing on were these systems that would compost organic waste in a controlled system that was optimized to then recover the CO2 that was involved. So you were stabilizing and managing organic waste and capturing the CO2 and on an end-to-end system, generating a very efficient, effective mechanism for drawing down carbon. And that type of technology would integrate very well with waste systems that municipalities often control.
Yeah, and how much time do I have? One more question. Yeah, let's do that. That's great. Well, one thing you did just bring, you're basically describing the model of circular carbon and circular economy, which is, again, something that really has its origins in city sustainability. I think it's really strongest there. So a lot of times we talk about carbon removal, it has to connect to some frame of reference locally in cities, and I think that you can talk about CDR and circular carbon, circular economy in very interchangeable ways. I know in Finland, I think Finland is really a place where circular carbon is really a part of the DNA of the sort of policymaking scheme. So let me ask one more question for the group here. We'll just go boom, 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 and then we'll take some questions here. But let's, this COP is really kind of two major themes it sits on. It's about short-term implementation with urgency by 2030, and mujira, the idea of collaborating and sort of exchanging. So I'm wondering, from each of your perches, I wonder if we can look forward to 2030 and in very specific ways in Helsinki. What rests between now and 2030? What would a very successful CDR program in Helsinki look like by 2030?
Well, if I would know, I don't think that we would need any of this research. So I think that the way that we look at things is there's going to be new technological innovations, there's going to be more research, there's going to be more supply. For most of those things that we would need for CDR, we don't have the supply. So it's not, we can create, that's skipping other things like low carbon cement. We didn't have that when we started to demand it, and now there's several producers. So we can create demand, but first we have to have the sort of facilities in place. But I would like to see the place where we would have the 50% residual emissions covered by negative emissions. But no.
Absolutely. And David, I don't know, with your broad knowledge of all the different forms of CDR and how they're sort of maturing, I don't know if there's any, when you look to 2030, if there's certain sort of bright sparks that pop up in terms of what kinds of CDR might we be seeing in cities that people are thinking about?
Well, the thing with CDR is that, as you know, there are so many different approaches to doing this. Running the X Prize competition, we saw in that competition 1,300 teams sign up to compete in that from the very beginning. And, every one of those represented a slightly different approach. We can bend them into different areas, but there's a lot. And I think in cities, it is going to focus on the municipal infrastructure that they control, so things like waste management, wastewater, looking at opportunities where you can turn those systems into negative emissions operations. And a lot of the passive approaches that can be built into the broader distributed infrastructure of cities, things like, biochar trees and passive CDR with, BFAC DAC and those sorts of things. But one of the things that we're looking at Enterprise is because of this demand, because there is an interest in the technologies, one of the barriers is having those technologies available and having a menu of technologies available to different types of cities as a function of their size, the types of resources they have, the types of infrastructure they control, and so on and so forth. So that's why a prize competition focused on the types of technologies that could broadly service cities and their strategies would elevate all of those technologies and make them much more visible to cities that want to adopt them and be a catalytic spark for them adopting them.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I'd say just more from maybe a governance, social acceptance, urban leadership perspective. I don't know if there's anything you could share about sort of expectations around the next 5 years.
Sure, thank you. I think what's special about UTM is it's an initiative that's driven by national governments, and so the cities that are part of the cohort have the support, in most cases, of their national governments in accessing the support that UTM is able to provide them. And so from a governance perspective, I think the next 5 years will really be critical to demonstrate how multi-level governance in this space, but more broadly as well, functions in practice, right? What are the roles that different levels of government need to play to effectively translate these high-level commitments, targets, a lot of which cannot be achieved without CDR as a complementary tool and technology, into actual concrete local action. So I think the next 5 years, having that capacity of cities to implement go up, having the available funding both from the public sector but also the private sector become more available, more affordable for cities, and having the understanding of the CDR space and the opportunities that CDR technologies can offer cities in assisting their decarbonization and resilience journeys really become enhanced. I would say that's it.
Yeah, I think the multi-level governance thing is so significant, and there might be national support for it, but one of the things that's kind of about cities is they start things sometimes and it trickles up to higher levels of government. It starts in cities and moves from ground upward. And Baron, I don't know if you have anything else to offer for the next 5 years.
Just very quickly, I think the technology bit obviously is very important. The governance is important. You've mentioned the capacity development. You've alluded to the finance. So in a way, we've covered all of the needs of implementation in one way or the other. But I think you're also very right in terms of how do we translate this spirit of community round to connect all of the dots. I think, yes, the cities need to be better connected. I think the multi-level governance and the mechanisms on how to really make this work, we need to figure that out. I think very concretely, the NDC guidelines, the NDC implementation plans, all of those can contribute to that and to connect some of those dots.
Absolutely great. Do we have any feedback or questions or things that we want to raise with our small, intimate audience? That includes you, Christian, listening to this. Anybody have a question or a remark?
Add one.
Yeah, please do.
Just to let everyone know, Christian, I'm sure you can talk about this as well, that UTM is also signing a collaboration and an MOU with the City CDR Initiative, so that's something to look forward to, and I think help deliver on some of the things that have been.
So important. The cities meeting that, you know, I mean, that is really a major development. So thank you for that. Christian, I don't know if you had anything to offer.
Well, I mean, just one thing, which is less of a question, so another remark about sort of how to improve the multi-level governance system. So we are announcing another MOU with the group of negative emitters on the 18th. So we're really trying to sort of level up, as they say. Now, I thought this was a super exciting conversation. Are there any questions from the audience? Otherwise, I think it's perfectly fine that we sort of leave it here. I think we covered such an enormous, terrain here. And it goes to show that it's the kind of journey that we can only go on together, because otherwise we'll probably get lost. Thanks, everyone.
Hello, testing.